So, good evening. Good evening.
大家晚上好。
So before going through with the 5 Zambala mantras, then maybe we can talk about a few things. I think it was entitled something like business, work, and was it ethics?
No.
Something like this. Are they compatible? So this is the subject matter for tonight.
然后我们
Personally, excuse me, please. So I was going to say, personally, I am not so well versed in business or work to some extent. But the idea, somehow, I have a theoretical understanding, and then together with, as we are here, I think we all have, we all come from a Buddhist background, and we are very much, since from a young age, we have been exposed to the Dharma from a very young age, and then I think to a certain extent, our thinking is very much connected with the Dharma, Even, I think from a young age, we were all taught not to harm small insects like this, And from a very young age, we were taught not to lie, and then not to harm others. So with this as our background, from a very young age, and then gradually as we grow up, then our parents would take us to the temples to see the Sangha, and then listening to the teachings, right? And then then somehow these interests, and they grow, and we become more exposed. And at first, in many of our cases, it was through our parents, our families, and friends like this. But then from a certain point, then we take a liking to the Dharma, or the Dharma, somehow it becomes closer to our hearts. So like this is something like our background. So ethics is very much connected with not harming others, right? And also honesty. This is very important. As many of you are already familiar with our practices, such as taking the 5 precepts, right? So the 5 precepts, or maybe the 4 precepts, however, beginning with not engaging in taking the life of others. This is very much connected with compassion, with love, right? With metta. So the Dharma is very much deeply rooted in these aspects. such as loving kindness and compassion. And with that, then, so this is like the root of all the other precepts, This is the root. The act, the pledge of not taking the life, which itself is connected with the practice of compassion, the practice of loving kindness. So this is the basis of all the other precepts. And with that, compassion, loving kindness as the basis, then all the other precepts, and then I think there are other elaborations of even more precepts. All of those precepts are in one way or another connected with loving kindness and compassion. These precepts, this is something like, the conduct or our ethical conduct, right? So this is very important. And here, what we call the 10 positive actions and the 10 negative actions, right? And then they are divided into the 3 physical actions, and then the 4 verbal actions, and then the 3 mental actions. So these 10, the positive 10 and the negative 10s. And then beginning with the 10 positive, then to avoid killing, to avoid taking the life of others, and then not engaging in sexual misconduct, and not engaging in stealing, right? So these 3 are the 3 positive physical actions. So like this, and then also the 4 verbal actions, positive actions, not engaging in polarizing speech, and then of course not engaging in deceitful speech, and then also not engaging in hurtful speech, and also not engaging in just something like idle chatter, So just going something like gossiping, I think. Gossiping, maybe for an instance like that, not engaging in unmeaningful speech. So like this. And then the 3 mental positive actions, then I think it is not engaging in covetousness, and then not engaging in malicious intent, and then not engaging in what we call something like wrong concepts, right? So then these 10, the first 7, the 3 physicals and the 4 verbal actions, these 7, by disengaging in these 7 negative actions, which are actually hurting others, and then the 3 mental actions, which are something like the motivational factor, right? So this is why we have these. There's a distinction made between the 7s and then the motivated action, which are the 7, and then the motivational factor, which are the 3 mental actions. So then, by disengaging in these 10 negative actions, like this. So, this is like this, and from a Dharma side, when we think from the viewpoint of Dharma, then it is there are very clear distinctions, right? But then on the other hand, when we have to live in this society, then this is when I think things may become a little difficult, right? It's not very clear. It's not very clearly defined. The right or the wrong, or the borders. The borders are not clearly defined in life when we have to work and be like everyone, be just a normal person outside of all these Buddhist concepts and this ethical view of thinking. Outside of that, then how do we navigate about, in life? Then this raises, when we are put in such situations, then this raises, I think, some questions. So then, preferably, ideally, when choosing a business or a work for that matter, then ideally it would be good if the business or work, it doesn't something like harm others, right? So, or doing a work in one's work, in your work, where you don't have to lie, where you can still be honest and still you can do your business, where you don't need to harm others, nor one has to be dishonest. If your business or work does not require neither of these two, then this is quite easy then. Then it's very clear what the answer is, right? This is one thing. If one's work does not require one to directly harm a being, that is good. But then what about indirectly, right? So it says something like, obviously, if you have taken the precept of not taking a life, right, for an instance, then it would be good to not sell something like fishing rods, for example, right? That would be good, right? But then if one is working for a factory that manufactures lots of steel products, and a significant percentage of these steel products end up in the fishing business, something like that, then what do you do? I think this is the kind of question that I have come across before, right? So when people ask these questions, then for me to give an answer, I find it quite challenging. This is again one thing. And then for an example, something like the profession as a doctor. I think this is it's a classic example of a good livelihood, If you are a doctor, then obviously you're curing sickness of others, right? This is very good. So this is one classic example given as a good, positive livelihood. But then simply being a doctor doesn't say much. If a doctor is dishonest in his profession, let us say, then this could lead to harming others, down the road, right? So then it's really very much connected with one's motivations, and upholding these two principles of not engaging in harming others and being honest, honesty. So then I think like this. And anyhow, when we think of each something like consequences of our actions, if we think, too far ahead, or if we think about all the various chain reactions that my action could set off, then I think it becomes very difficult, right? What I mean by difficult, I mean it goes out of your hands. It is not in your hands anymore, right? If you think about all the consequences that would lead to that, and then the chain reaction, and so forth and so on, down the road, then it really goes out of our hand. So all the things that could arise as a result of one's actions, to begin with, one is not responsible for that. I don't think so. So this, we have to make it very clear. All the things that could possibly happen due to your action, are you responsible for all of those? Of course not. As long as that is made clear, then I think in many of these kind of situations, then I think it is clear, It will be easier for you to make a decision, whether in choosing this kind of business or work or something like this. Then I think it will help to get out of this, get out of this dilemma or confusion. So the very fact that if we find ourselves as in this dilemma of balancing our work and our ethics, then it is obvious that by virtue of being in this dilemma, that one wants to do good, right? This is very clear. Now, to do good, yes, the wish to do good is a good thing, but then we also need simply doing an action out of a good motivation, out of, let us say, compassion, might not necessarily be good, or it might not necessarily have the intended effect, right? For example, like in our society, when the Sangha is invited, by the benefactors, then everyone, of course, all the benefactors want to make the best offering. So they give the best food and lots of food. And they really insist that the monks take lots of food, right? So if the benefactors continue doing that, then pretty soon I think many of the monks will then develop something like diabetes and then maybe high cholesterol, if they are always given the best food in abundance, all the time like this. Of course, the benefactors do that with good intention to really make, something like good karma, create good merit, and making offerings to the Sangha with a very good intention. That is right. But then also to have something like to think from the viewpoint of the receiver, This is also, I think, very important. Very important. Not just from the giver's point of view, but then from the receiver's point of view, then one needs to have both of these, in perspective. So maybe at this point, I think we have some questions collected from this afternoon. So.
所以在这里呢，我们今天下午到现在呢，就是已经收集了一些提问问题，所以在这里的为大家解答。
So the first question, Rinpoche, how to manage automation when robots take over our jobs? Can we don't practice ethics and compassion to robots and automation because they don't have a sentient life?
Could I have the question again?
How to manage automation when robots take over our jobs? Yeah.
Okay.
Can we don't practice ethics and compassion to robots because they do not have a sentient life?
How to manage automation when robots take over our jobs? And what's the second part? I didn't understand. Can we don't practice ethics and compassion to robots and automation as they don't have a sentient life? Oh, right. I don't know how to answer this question.
I also don't know. Can you WhatsApp me the questions? Thanks. Somebody a bit too clever.
Very interesting. A few years back, in one of the Mind and Life conferences, I think there was this one discussion between two scientists, and one was quite sure that AI would develop to a point where AI could become sentient, and that scientist was quite sure of that. So maybe then, when that becomes a reality, then perhaps we would have to also include those sentient AI and their process into this compassion. Okay, so trying to answer the question, Yes, robots are currently, I don't think they are considered sentient, at least not yet. So in these times, then, if they take over our jobs, I don't know. This is something. Yes, of course. In large factories, I think the robots are doing many of the. They're very much part of the what you call the factory line. So they're already part of that. So this question is very interesting.
所以这个问题呢是非常有趣的。
Actually, I was just thinking, it just came to mind. The person here is asking about robots. When robots start to take away our jobs, then what do we do, right? How do we react to that? But then you can think differently. How about we have tractors, right? And we have this, what do you call that? These big machines for the constructions, right? We already have many of these huge machines that would, like the concrete mixer, and then these other trucks with those. I don't remember like the exact terms, but you know what I'm talking about. So we have that, and the tractors, and then the tractors with various fittings for the big fields. So they have already taken away the job of so many, yeah. And then with like the industrial revolution, then I think also that brought big changes to society, you know, and in the career of many, that brought much change. So something new, it's like with many revolutionary process. That is why they are termed revolutionary, right? Because they really affect the society. So as new technology are made and as they become prevalent, and then some others become kind of obsolete in that process. This is something very basic, I think. You know, something very basic. From the Dharma, it's called something like impermanence, right? There is this like evolutionary process, right? So I think it is a case of impermanence, of this ever-changing nature. So as something, I think here it's, again, the point is, I think we are human beings, and we human beings have this natural gift to adapt, you know, to adapt to any situations, to adapt to new situations, to adapt to new challenges. So as these big shifts start to happen in our lives, then I think together with this, then there will be something like new industry will be coming out of that. And then accordingly, then I think we humans, we will adapt. We have to adapt, right? There is no other way. So maybe like this. I think before, like, I remember like when I was small, we had like when we went to the train stations in India, there were many porters, porters. But nowadays we don't see that many porters because most of our luggages have wheels. They have wheels, so naturally people will, it's easier, right? Whereas in the olden days, we didn't have those, so if it was heavy, then we needed someone else to help us, right? But then where are the porters now? If you were to ask, well, they will change, they have changed their careers, and maybe there's a new work, maybe making wheels for those bags, Maybe there's another new industry has arisen. So like that. Okay.
Rinpoche, the next question. Should I report unethical or dishonest acts, for example, taking the credits of others that my fellow colleagues does? Should I report these unethical or dishonest acts to my supervisor? I'm fearful that I will be disturbing the harmony among fellow colleagues and also accumulate bad karma.
So I think, should you report that? So again, we have to see should I report unethical or dishonest acts? For example, taking credit of others, of fellow colleagues to my supervisor. I'm fearful that I will be disturbing the harmony among fellow colleagues and also accumulate bad karma. Interesting how you put, for example, taking credit of others, because this reminds me of one conversation I had just a few days back with a friend who was working on something like the thesis, doctorate thesis, and he was working under one teacher, professor, and this professor was using many of his because he was now he has access to all his thesis. He is taking many things from those and then presenting them with others, but without giving credit to his student. So the teacher was doing that. So then it just reminded me of that. So it's hard for me to say you should do this or you shouldn't do that, but if I was in your position, I think for this kind of act that is taking the credit of other, and we have to see again. I don't know how, because not taking credit of the work of others, they are not all equal, right? So one taking credit of other might be on a very small level, but then on another level, this taking credit could be on a big level, and it could really change, and you know what I mean, right? So something like a small lie and a big lie, right? So we have to think like this. So if this colleague obviously taking credit of others is, I think, deceiving. There's no denying that, right? So you have to then ask yourself, you have to see whether how much credit is the person taking? And then if you do report this unethical behavior, then it seems that from the question at least, that there is likely to be ramification. There is likely that act could disturb the harmony among fellow colleagues, as you put it. So then you have to balance that, to balance that with that. Is it worth taking that risk, right? If this taking credit of other is only trivial, then I think maybe it's not worth causing this disturbance, this disturbing the harmony among fellow colleagues. Maybe it's not. This is one thing. Then on the other hand, then what is this disturbing the harmony among fellow colleagues? What is that? What does that mean, right? So, disturbing the harmony among fellow colleagues, this could be among just 3 or 4 colleagues who are on the same page as the colleague who is doing these dishonest acts. Maybe are they in the same game, so to speak, right? So you have to think of all these variables. Without all of these variables being very clearly defined, then it is very hard for me to say it's better you do this or it's better you don't do this, right? Because I cannot, because we have to think about what this dishonest act is, and then what is disturbing the harmony among fellow colleagues is. How much of that disturbing the harmony among fellow colleagues? Yeah? So without knowing all of this, then it is hard for me to give a straight answer. But it would be nevertheless good to, I think, something like weigh all these options, right? Or all these variables. This is, I think, very important to understand this situation fully, and then, if possible, then to perhaps look at it from the viewpoint of this colleague who is doing the dishonest act. Try to understand why the colleague is engaging in such acts. Maybe there is a way that you don't have to report the colleague to the supervisor directly. Maybe you can talk it through with the person who is doing this, taking credit of others' work, right? So, something like that. This is very interesting. Something like reporting a fellow colleague to the supervisor, right? So if this fellow colleague is really harming someone, in the workplace, then definitely, I think, if you can, then it would be good to report, right? But for taking credit of the work of others versus the ramification that was presented, that was worded in your question, then you have to really you have to think, yeah. Okay, so next question.
Rinpoche, the next question is, Dear Rinpoche, by right we shouldn't be greedy. Then why do we pray to Zambala or Taishen, which is Zambala?
This is a very good question.
很好的一个问题啊，问得好。
So, the Zambala practice very interesting. In relation to the Mahayana practice, the 6 perfections, then this is very important, beginning with the practice of giving. The practice of giving. Of course, practice of giving doesn't mean that we have to give like in the form of wealth or like food or things like that. It need not be in that form. Even I think something like sharing the Dharma is considered a form of giving, and also I think helping someone from great danger, for example, is also a form of giving as well, right? But generally, yes, then giving to the needy like this is very much part of the perfect 6 this perfection practice. So only in the context of this Mahayana practice, perfection practice, then something like this Zambala practice is practiced within that context. Is there another question?
Rinpoche, the other question is for a business owner. If a new staff joins the company for a few days and he gets into a fight outside, do we, out of pure compassion, decide to pay for his medical expenses, regardless of how he got into a fight? As a Buddhist, do we simply help anyone who happens to come our way with a need? Maybe it's because we owe them in our previous lives?
For a business owner, if a new staff joins the company for a few days, gets into a fight outside, do we, out of pure compassion, decide to pay for his medical expenses, hospitalization, and treatment, regardless of how he got into a fight? As a Buddhist, do we simply help anyone who happens to come our way with a need? Maybe because we owe him or her something in our previous lives. So in this case, then, yes, I think I would say yes. Of course, if you are in a position to do that, then of course to pay for the person's medical expense. I think this is, the right thing to do. And then in the second part, it mentions maybe because we owe him or her something in our previous lives. I'm not so sure about that, because I think, it said pure compassion. I think with pure compassion, if we think, because we owe this person or something like this from our previous lives, then that doesn't sound like pure compassion to me, right? I think pure compassion, it just comes naturally without thinking, this person, I might be in debt of this person or something like that, So this I don't know, but out of pure compassion, if you can do that, wonderful, do that, yeah? So this, we don't have to add any more to why we are helping anyone in this kind of situations. One should just simply go ahead and do that. And then in the question, there is also regardless of how he got into a fight. So this, I think, if you have the time and the means, then of course, after this employee has fully recovered from the injuries, etc., then try to maybe talk with the person and then hear the story, hear his or her story, right? About this fight, and maybe the person might need some help in regulating emotion, regulating emotions. So like this, I think it will be helpful, to also help with the person's self-regulation and then emotional control, right? So like this is something more like for the future. The immediate future is of course to mend the injuries and then to make a full recovery from those injuries. And then later, if you as the owner of this business have the resources, then to get something like to the root of this problem, and naturally, as time goes by, then I think you will as you get a better sense of this employee in question, then it will be very clear for you, right, whether this person would need this kind of assistance in self-regulation and controlling the emotions. And if the person needs help, then if you have the resource, then it would be nice if you could also provide assistance in like that way, So this will be something like not just a short-term solution, but something perhaps like more long-term. So like this.
所以在这里
Yeah, maybe one more.
Rinpoche, the question is, some Buddhists are very generous and they make a lot of donations to the temples, but why do they still find it difficult to earn a living?
Some Buddhists are very generous and made a lot of donations to the temple center, but why do they still find it difficult to earn a living? I wonder, these Buddhists, did they find it difficult to earn a living before being generous and making those donations to the Zambala/center? I don't know. Yes, even though in our text we say by being generous, right? By practicing generosity, then you will Jimbe Longzhe. It brings prosperity, right? It brings prosperity. So this is one thing. I think in Nagarjuna's Precious Garland there is these verses, and of course in the sutras, I'm sure it's also mentioned that practicing generosity results in prosperity, in one's prosperity. I think there's one sutra. Maybe it's Ugra's questions from the Ratnakuta Mahayana Sutra, from that collection, Ratnakuta collection, where Buddha mentions that generosity, compassionate and selfless generosity brings prosperity. Yeah? So, compassionate, the motivation, compassionate. And then in terms of like the result, then selfless. Right? So, compassionate and selfless generosity brings prosperity. So this is, I think, a very important teaching. So, like this, I think, like this. So then now it's almost, we are almost reaching our point. So I think it's with the 5, but there was this question about why Zambala, I think, before, we have already, how did it go? Something like,
if Buddhists should not be greedy, why do we need to practice Zambala?
Zambala, right. I think many of you who are practicing Zambala, I don't think you do it out of greed. I think many of you do this because as part of your Mahayana practice, as part of your sixth perfection practice, right? Because simply praying to Zambala will not bring wealth. That is so clear. If simply by praying we will all become prosperous, then this would be like the number one job. It will be the number one job, the number one career, just Zambala practitioner. Then maybe the stock market crashes. Or maybe it goes higher, that would be a paradox. Then I think we would have a paradox. If we will be in a paradoxical situation. Yeah? So it's not like that. It is not in order. It is not, we do not engage in these practices, this wealth deity practice for the sake of acquiring wealth. Of course, that is not the commitment. That is, of course, not our motivation. This is very clear, right? So it is only within the context of engaging in the six perfections. It is only within that context. Then we do this practice. Okay, so let me so we will just like yesterday, there are different mantras, and this I've received these within, just like yesterday, in the Rinjung collection, and in that collection, then we went with the mantras as mentioned in that collection. So many of you are familiar already with the 5 Zambala mantras. So then I think we will do it like this. Just before this, maybe we can take just a few moments to reflect, to just simply reflect and then generate the prerequisite motivation. And maybe I can say the refuge bodhicitta verse, so maybe we can say that all together. Sangye Shudang Soge Shonam La Chancho Bado Dani Gyabsu Jin Dagi Jujin Gibe Sonam Gi
Dola Pinchara Sangye Drupha Sho Sangye Chedan Sogi Shonam La Changjo Pado Dani Gyapsu Shi Dagi Chunye Gibe Tsonam Gi Dola Pinchara Sangye Drupha Sho Sangye Chedan Sogi Shonam La Changjo Pado Dani Gyapsu Shi Dagi Chunye Gibe Tsonam Gi Dola Pinchara Sangye Drupha Sho.
Okay, so now beginning with the yellow Zambala. You can now repeat.
现在请跟着随念。
Om Zambala, Zalendaye Soha. Om Zambala, Zalendaye Soha. Om Zambala, Zalendaye Soha. And then with the black Zambala in the something like the Kashmiri Pandit. So black Zambala in the tradition of the Kashmiri Pandit, Kaji Panchen. Om Zambala, Zalendaye Soha. Om Zambala, Zalendaye Soha. Om Zambala, Zalendaye Soha. And then now the white Zambala, 5 deities, white Zambala. Om Pema Koda, Arya Zambala, Shridaya Hompe. Om Pema Koda, Arya Zambala, Shridaya Hompe. Om Pema Koda, Arya Zambala, Shridaya Hompe. Now the red Zambala in the tradition of Tawa Ngönshe, so something like the clairvoyant monk. Om Zambala, Zalendaye, Danamiti, Shisoha. Om Zambala, Zalendaye, Danamiti, Shisoha. Om Zambala, Zalendaye, Danamiti, Shisoha. And now the 5th green Zambala in the Kala Chakra tradition. Om Zambala, Zalendaye Soha. Om Zambala, Zalendaye Soha. Om Zambala, Zalendaye Soha. Okay, so this completes that. And yesterday, with the mantra Om Amrita Prape Amrita Hum, and then I think in the Zakali it was written Tate. So this is a Tibetanized. So that when we Tibetanize it, it becomes Tate. But in Sanskrit, it is pronounced Prape. And we are also facing the same issue here in the case of the white Zambala, Om Pema Krota. So in Sanskrit it is Krota, but when we Tibetanize it, then it becomes Tota. So this is not an error, but it was left like this intently. Okay, so I think like this. And then yesterday, I think there was also one question I came to know later when I was explaining something, the lights emitting from Amitabha. Then there was one person I think had this doubt: was the light coming from the bowl or from the body or something like this. So I think the light is coming from Amitabha, from his body. Yes. So then I think with all these questions we had, and then with your interest, I just feel to say this, that yes, when we try to follow as it is mentioned in the sutras, word by word, I think it is very difficult given our current situation. This is a fact that we have to face, we have to accept. Now, you know the narrative, in this degenerate era and blah, 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 blah. So you know the whole narrative. In this background, in this situation, somehow I get the sense that you are really making an effort as much as possible to align yourself with the teachings of the Buddha. And from my side, I see that as a plus. So whenever you are facing this dilemma of how to bring your work and your dharma together, right? Whenever you are in these difficult situations, from how I see it, I see that as a good thing, that this is very much part of the path, that this is the path. This dilemma or any struggle or this kind of questions, this is very good, and this is important, and you have to work with this. Yeah, you have to simply work in this. Of course, all things are not perfect. Always keep. It's very important to remind ourselves of that. But as much as we can, then try to practice and then apply these teachings in our lives, and particularly in our working life, in our works, in our business, then as much as possible, and try to always try to build on what you have already built, and try to just take one more step like that. So with this, then I just want to say thank you. Yes. Yeah.